already joined the event, so I was thinking if you would like to make an intro, because we can't hear you or see you, or should we start? Webinar, and he's managing the WebEx, so and I cannot make contact anyhow. I don't know what's going on, but I suppose I see here that that I think it is being recorded. So I think maybe we could start.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
actually, I don't see any other participants other than you and myself. It's a bit strange.
Hi, this is
But I
Anders
can also see that.
Hi,
Ah,
can
What
you
do you
hear
okay,
me?
mean?
This is
I
Anders.
can see there are 137 participants already, 138.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
But the thing is, Laszlo was supposed to have them all muted because it would be crowded otherwise. But anyway, since it's already 12:05, and I see a lot of people coming in this chat saying that they can see me and they can hear me. So maybe we could just start. Okay. Hello.
Yes, it's fine for me.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna go on mute so we don't interrupt.
Okay, good. So I'm going to share my screen now. So this is my chat with Laszlo. So anyways, here's this. Okay. So these are the slides. So since I can hear some of you, you can even confirm if you can see everything and if everything is okay, because I'm not going to be able to see the chat while I'm presenting. Okay, so hello everyone. This webinar was created by Dr. Jashun Okonohua, the principal of Scatterwork, and myself. And as for me, my name is Orana Boltic. I'm a chemical engineer by education. I have a PMP and a PhD in technical science. I also have more than 20 years working experience in pharmaceutical industry, starting from R&D and quality to operations and corporate affairs. And I will be delivering this webinar today on behalf of Scatterwork. So basically today we are going to be focusing on some insights and sorry, for some reason doesn't work the slides. Just a minute. So I'm sorry for this. Just
Zorana, can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you.
Everything works fine now. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I had some
Is
technical issues
it
with my
Laszlo?
own.
Okay. Okay,
It's me.
so I'm going to share my screen now. I hope everything is okay,
Yes.
because we a bit difficulty, so I didn't know what to do, whether to start or
Yes, you can start
not.
now. We have 156 people online.
Okay. So I don't know whether you are recording or did start recording already, or
The recording is running.
okay, so so again, I already have introduced myself, and here I now want to go to the synopsis, which I'm not going to read. Basically, today we will be focusing on some insights and motivational tips in relation to stakeholder management in global projects. And you have the synopsis here, and you also have our biographies, which you can read afterwards in your own time. I would like to say a couple of words about Scatterwork, though. Scatterwork is a Swiss-based project consultancy empowering project managers to reduce project delivery times, costs, and risks. And the main strength of the company is its experience in a large number of countries. Over the years, Scatterwork developed a huge network of clients in various sectors, which you can see listed on this slide. So as for the agenda for today, we are going to pick up one particular subject that is relevant no matter which methodology you are using. It is applicable to all project methodologies and all projects, and this particular subject is stakeholders. Then we are going to talk more about stakeholder diversity in global projects, because nowadays on our projects we all have people sitting somewhere else, and we need to manage as well. And we are going to give you some practical tips based on our own experience for stakeholder management in global projects. And at the end, we will have a Q&A session, and that will be an opportunity for you to share comments and if you have any questions. Now, the first thing that I want to draw your attention to is that stakeholders and stakeholder management is completely irrelevant of the methodology that you are using. So basically, whatever methodology that you are currently using on your projects, either it's a waterfall approach or agile that is becoming more and more popular nowadays, stakeholders are important, and you do have stakeholders. And as for the PMI, and by the way, I am also volunteering as a director for professional development in the Serbia chapter. And I suppose you are all familiar with the PMBOK guide. And from my experience, I know that a lot of people think of PMBOK guide as a Bible of project management, because it actually represents a compendium of the overall world project practice. But the thing is, sometimes people see PMBOK guide as a huge, sometimes even boring matter to read. But I would like you to think about of PMBOK in a different way. Just think of it as a very valuable source of the overall knowledge based on decades of inputs from thousands of project managers across the globe. So you can pick up anything like a checklist of things that you need to think about and that you need to consider when running a project. And although the PMI is even now changing its approach, and we are now looking at the version 7 of the PMBOK guide, we still need to apply certain processes to initiate our project, and one of those processes is to identify stakeholders. Now, thinking of the stakeholders, the question is, who are they and why do we need them on our projects? And the answer to that is that stakeholders are nearly everybody. So everybody that can impact the results of our projects and everybody that gets impacted of what we want to deliver with our projects. And being project managers, we all want to be successful. And the question is, what represents success on the project? And particularly the stakeholders are the ones who decide what success means on our particular project. So why do we need them? So basically, I don't know if you are aware of some statistics, but when you talk about the successful projects, the first reason for a successful project is a good project manager. But when you talk about project failures, so the first reason for unsuccessful project and project failures are incomplete requirements. And behind the incomplete requirements actually is the incomplete list of the stakeholders, because the requirements are discovered and gathered from the stakeholders themselves. So if we don't have the clear requirements, we don't have a scope well defined, and then the uncertainty in our projects, in our estimates is increased, and the overall level of risks then is increased. So basically we need the stakeholders to discover the requirements for our projects, to discover, to actually understand the success criteria, and to collect the information about the risks. And sometimes, as you might be aware from your own experience, even some stakeholders may represent the risk themselves when working on projects. Now, if I'd ask you, who are your stakeholders, you will probably come up with sponsor, senior management, top managers, your team members. But the thing is that the list of stakeholders is much broader than that. And you need to think about outside your project or even outside your own organization to discover and identify all the stakeholders. Outside of your project, in your own organization, there might be, for example, other project managers that are using the same resources as you are. So you need to consider those as external dependencies when developing your schedules. And on the other hand, you also have stakeholders that are outside your organization and might not even be aware of your project, but still can have a huge impact on your success. I don't know whether you are aware of situations like that or can relate to what I'm talking about. But the thing is that we usually think about stakeholders as interested parties. What I'm saying is that they don't even have to be interested. They don't have to be involved at all. But then again, can have a huge power to destroy your project, or even in another direction to help you be more successful. So this is a potential that we should use on our projects. Talking about global projects, and this is the situation gets even more complicated, because you need to put more effort in managing the stakeholders' diversity, and this diversity can be geographical, cultural, organizational. The thing is that the more distant these people are from you, the less they would do what they want them to do on your project. Because if somebody's sitting dislocated from where you are, they probably have their own boss coming in their office every day and saying, look, I need you to do this and that. And then they would drop your project and do what this other person is asking them to do. And then what happens is that your project is then late. And and of course, in global projects and distant stakeholders, all the misunderstanding are more difficult to resolve, because the conflicts and the strategies that can be applied in conflict management then are much easier to practice when you have people collocated in the room. So all the misunderstandings are multiplied and more get more complicated. And now you have several aspects of distance on your projects that you need to consider. And this is the simplest view, is that you can have stakeholders in distant lands, geographically distant stakeholders in good communication, meaning that they can be in another country but similar culture to yours, so you can have a very good communication with them. And then you can have stakeholders collocated in the same organization as you and in the same environment and or in the same country, and these would be considered as near stakeholders. But then again, there are other aspects that bring in further complexity into this. And for example, when you think about the stakeholders in distant lands, this is, for example, I was working for a long time for an international company that has headquarters in Germany and manufacturing plants all over the Europe and Asia and UK. And then what might happen that even though your team members are in the same organization as you are, they still might be very distant in terms of geographical distance and also in terms of different cultures. But even sometimes in situations like this, you may even find yourself that you have a more close communication, for example, with suppliers and their employees that are in your own country or in your own region than with your team members, for example, in Vietnam or Russia or other distant countries. And of course, you can have also the situation where all the stakeholders are in the same country, even in the same company, for example. And then again, you have different types of distance. For example, different in the organization, different job levels in the hierarchy, distant managers that you need to manage in a different way. So basically, I'm going to move on now to some of the tips that I would like to share based on some experience on global projects and dealing with distant stakeholders. And on this slide, you can see something like a checklist, and these are different aspects of that you need to consider when you have a global project and diversified stakeholders. And sometimes it may seem minor, but there are things depending on the situation that can create a great deal of frustration even if we haven't thought them through in a timely manner. For example, there was this seminar organized for a Hungarian audience, and of course, the material for the seminar was prepared the night before. And what happened is that emerged that the printer typeface did not distinguish between some specific letters, and as a consequence, the text was difficult to read due to wrong accents. So again, it might not be huge, but in this particular situation, it didn't look good, and could have been avoided only if all the delivery details were checked with affected stakeholders at the very beginning. And out of all of these aspects of diversity that were shown on the previous slide as a checklist, I would like to focus specifically on the cultural aspects. So I don't know if you are familiar with the Hofstede 6 dimensions of national culture. And this is something that you might find very useful, for example, when running a global project and have stakeholders in different countries, different cultures. I don't know, Laszlo, do we have any questions at this point? Because I think we're okay with the time. So
No questions at the moment. Carry on, please.
Okay, good. You can see the link at the bottom of the page. And then you can see different indices described by Hofstede. But what I would like to say a few things more is this power distance index, because I see this particular index very important when um, planning communications on a project, and it can certainly impact the complexity of the communications on the project depending on the culture. So you can see here some of the indices for the 4 markets that are target markets for the scatter work. But what you can do if you are at the moment involved in a global project and have the need to check different cultures, you can go to this link and look for your own regions and your own areas. But this power distance index, I would like to give you some examples. For example, in Netherlands, for example, you would be able to see a prime minister cycling to work, going to work by bicycle, which is something that you would definitely not be able to see in Serbia, or probably, I suppose, in Hungary as well, because if you go east, in particular, this power distance index increases, and this means a very specific attitudes towards authority and different expectations thereof in different cultures. So when you have the bigger power distance index, the more complex the communication are, because people are not really comfortable approaching their boss or top management, talking about their issues, and they're very often not empowered enough to make their own decisions, but they need to ask their boss for the permission. I don't know whether you came across situations like this. So basically, this is something that I think might be very useful to check out. Then again, even in the same country and in the same culture, you could have different variations within corporate cultures, and these would apply to different job levels, different department functional areas, company structure, differences in education, age, gender, etc., of people employed at the site. For example, when talking about different departments and functional areas, I don't know whether you had experience to work like with engineers versus people from marketing and sales, because engineers tend to be more disciplined, and their expectations are to have very clear requirements, and they tend to be very disciplined about deadlines, because their mind is set in a way to plan things and to be disciplined. Whereas, for example, people from marketing and sales, because of what they do, they tend to be more creative, which is great in certain situations. But sometimes they tend to be more flexible about the dates and the plan, and sometimes it can be quite frustrating. So some tips on the culture. This is these are the list of things to consider and to question yourself when working with different cultures. I think what's very important for project managers is, besides other soft skills and competencies that they need to work on during their career, it's very important to think about also about your own personal cultural competences and how to build them up. It is very important to know yourself and the others, and to be able and ready to adapt without losing your cultural identity. I mean, all of us, we need to ask ourselves how far we want to go with different people, and how much we want to adapt. So you need to be comfortable with this. Some examples on that. understanding different cultures. I had the opportunity to work with the German colleagues a lot because I was working for a pharmaceutical company that with the headquarters in Germany, and sometimes people from Germany were perceived as very strict and directive in their communication. And on our side, for example, in Serbia, it often created some kind of resistance, and we weren't comfortable with this. But the thing is that behind this behavior, they just wanted the job done. They didn't have any motivation to demonstrate their authority and the power, but just wanted to get the job done. And once you understand that motivation, then you get less frustrated, and it's easier, and it's easier to cooperate and collaborate. Some tips on the culture. Again, don't be too sure in interpreting someone's behavior as caused by culture, because of course we have our own personal differences, and we should avoid having this like you know, I can't remember the word, but they are German, so that's why they're behaving like this. So we also have our own personal differences. And another tip is to try to use your sense of humor, because it's really a powerful tool, especially in a multicultural environment when a conflict appears, and it's very often that there are a lot of misunderstandings with a lot of diversity, and the humor is a very powerful tool to resolve this. Um, Okay, I'm going to go through some real life scenarios followed by some tips. So these are not about the culture, these are more about the costs. And that was one situation where there was a Canadian manufacturer that was delivering a very high level product to a customer in France. And this product was tested before dispatch, but what happened on the side of the uh, French customer, they were constantly rejecting the product, and the provider in Canada didn't understand why. And the thing was that they didn't want to release the product because they didn't want to share some of the test results. It was their intellectual property, and that it was confidential. So basically, the Canadian provider didn't understand why the product has been rejected. It wasn't even communicated to him. So basically, what went wrong here is that the cost impact wasn't really calculated and wasn't communicated properly on this project. But even we go further, if we go beyond that, I would say that on this particular project, what went wrong was also the risk management process, because it is the risk management process during which you should identify all the risks in communications like this, and calculate the cost impacts that might be very important for either side, and communicate those cost impacts to relevant stakeholders. Because communicating cost is also a very good tool to technique to engage the stakeholders, but because a lot of people are sensitive to the language of cost. Probably if the French customer was aware of the consequences and the cost impact of what he was doing, it would have been completely different. Another scenario, and again, this is not about not communicating the right things to the right stakeholders, but not even identifying all the stakeholders on the particular project and not developing the strategies on how to engage them. So this was the situation where the new mobile phone network in Switzerland they were not able to use the existing masts, and then they needed to build and install the new antennas in different locations. All the good locations were already taken by the existing mobile phone networks. So what they faced was a lot of objections from the inhabitants, and in the German-speaking cantons, people were afraid that they are going to be killed by so-called electrosmog, while in the French-speaking environments, they were more concerned because the antennas didn't look good and so on. So what actually happened was that one of the inhabitants in the neighborhood actually complained that antenna gave her headaches, and when the situation was checked on the field, it turned out that the antenna wasn't even connected or powered up, but she still went on the television to complain about the headaches. So basically what happened here, I don't know if you are using, you probably are on your project. When you identify your stakeholders, you probably use different grids in order to analyze them and categorize your stakeholders so that you can develop adequate strategies on how to deal with them. So and I don't the one of the matrices I use a lot is the power interest grid. So what usually happens on project is that people with low power they get neglected as stakeholders, and the appropriate strategies are not applied to communicate with them. So what happened here is that on this particular project, not all stakeholders were identified, specifically the inhabitants of the area where the antennas were to be installed, and they were very much interested in the impact of this project, and they were not considered initially, and then they used a power of the media to actually come into the position to impact the results of the project. So this project. And this could be cause delays on the project and different nuisance which can be avoided just by uh, applying adequate strategies with particular stakeholders. I don't know what's the situation in Hungary, but we also have a lot of this in Serbia because we have a huge number of development projects that are supported by our government, and we have a huge number also of people that are objecting and complaining about the impact of these projects to their everyday lives, and not going into whether this is justified or not. The thing is that whenever we are managing a project, we need to think also about those stakeholders who are impacted but less powerful at the moment, but then again they can become powerful through using some other powerful stakeholders like public and the media. Another tip is on how to engage stakeholders, and this is not for those with power, but especially with the key stakeholders on your project, is to review the requirements like regularly with them, because is something that would keep the stakeholders engaged, and that would help you as a project manager to capture changing expectations and adapt communication strategies to avoid dissatisfaction. Now we are approaching to the end, and I have some additional bonus tips, and this is one of the tools that you can use like a storytelling approach to explain your assignments. So basically, when you have a person or stakeholder that you want to introduce into your project, you need to be able to explain what the project is. And a good way to do this is to have a very simple flip chart, like a one pager, to help somebody from outside or somebody who is new on your project to explain what is actually that you are doing. And you need to focus on the stuff that is important for that particular stakeholder, because people that should be involved in your project, they are not really, sometimes they're not interested that you are running a 10 million project, which makes you a big project, an important project manager. More likely is they want to know how and who is impacted by the project, what kind of work is involved, what is expected, what kind of risks are associated with that project, and so on. So this one pager and the storytelling approach can be very useful. Again, in my experience, I think people get more motivated to cooperate and to work with you when they understand the purpose of what you are doing very well. So instead of going to somebody and say, just do it for me, it brings value just to take some time and explain exactly why this needs to be done and why it is really important, so that a person can understand the big picture and how his specific tasks can fit into this big picture. So another tip is to specify these work assignments exactly in this order. So the first question is why, the second question, what work needs to be done, when, and of course by who. Because if you don't define and delegate responsibilities for specific tasks, probably nothing is going to happen. And this is not, again, this is not because somebody doesn't want to help and doesn't want to support, but this is mostly because they don't understand the purpose, and they don't understand exactly what is expected from them. This is just a summary of all the takeaway tips for the dispersed projects, the projects that are like global projects where we have a lot of diversity. So the first one again is to check diversity parameters of your own and stakeholders' national cultures. And remember, this was the Hofstede 6 dimensions of national culture that we discussed, and you can find really interesting things there about different cultures depending on the stakeholders on your particular projects. Again, review your own personal cultural competence, because you are the one that needs to be balancing very often. In some examples that I mentioned, for example, with headquarters in Germany and team members in Russia, Vietnam, and UK, and of course you have also suppliers scattered all over the world. So you need to think about your own personal cultural competencies and how you can jungle with them. The third tip was about the scenario I communicated as an advice. Whenever you can, communicate the cost impact and engage the stakeholders in risk management, so that you can even prevent such impacts and not wait until they occur. Identify all the stakeholders and relevant engagement strategies, and this is where I mentioned the stakeholder power interest grid that I use very often. Review requirements regularly with the stakeholders, and at the end some bonus tips: the storytelling approach to explain your assignments, and the orderly specifying these assignments in a particular order, so that all of your stakeholders can understand where you're coming from, and that you can trigger their collaboration by being motivated to follow your objectives. So yeah, that's more or less that from my side. So if now, Laszlo, if there are any questions?
Yes. Thanks very much, Zorana, for the wonderful presentation. I shared with you the questions, so I would really appreciate if you could look at the chat window because there are a number of different questions. If you want, I can read them loud.
Yes.
Okay, so question.
Yes,
Can you see
please.
the question?
I now exited the
Sure, no problem.
shares. Yes, share
Okay,
screen.
so the first question is, some cases a stakeholder could use information and transparency for his or her own benefit. What could be opposite of project goals? Have you any idea how to handle that?
Oh, I understand. You're talking about the stakeholders that participate the project, but then again, they have their own objectives and their own
Exactly.
agendas. Yes. Well, yeah, that is an interesting question, but I didn't have I don't know whether there is a specific situation that you had in mind when you asked that question. But if I understand properly, is that somebody is aiming uh, um, uh, to abuse a project to
Correct.
actually yeah. Well, the way you could handle this actually depends on the power of this particular person to actually achieve that. So if the person is less powerful, then obviously it would be easier to manage the situation like that. And then you can maybe kind of bargain with this person in terms that because as a project manager, your task is not only to deliver the project in terms of objectives, but also to satisfy and understand the needs of all of your stakeholders, including the personal needs of your team members. So if there is any way to approach this person and understand exactly what he or she needs and maybe try to answer these needs in a different way, that might be an option. On the other hand, if this person is like more powerful, then probably this is something that you would need to escalate uh, uh, with the management and try to resolve in a different way, because if that person in particular is a part of the top management and wants to do something that is like not aligned with the strategy, and the strategy is the responsibility of the top management and the sponsorship team, so then the escalation would be a good
Okay,
approach.
thank you very much. So the second question is, and I think this is a very relevant question for many of us who are working in a virtual environment. So the second question is, how to build effective stakeholder relationship in virtual teams?
Um, yeah, this is quite a challenge, of course, but I think um I don't know. I think the technology nowadays is so advanced, and there are a lot of people that I work with, even people that I haven't even met, and I feel very close to them because I think that, for example, this WebEx meetings and different platforms to meet people and discuss are a good way for even for communication, and you might even feel that you are in the same room with the person. But anyway, I think effective stakeholder relationships are always built on trust and integrity. So I think a good approach is to develop a relationship of trust, even though these stakeholders might be distant. It doesn't prevent you to have one-on-one meetings and discuss different topics and different concerns that might even be personal. So I think this professional integrity and trust and preparedness for listen to other people and understand where they're coming from. I don't see any obstacle in using these conversations and meetings like this, even with virtual teams.
Mhm. Thank you very much. Before I turn to the third question, I would like to announce that the polling is open. So ladies and gentlemen, look at the poll, bottom right corner of your screen, and we are going to ask a couple of questions there. If you would like to claim a PDU point, you have to provide your PMI ID and email address. And on the other hand, we would really appreciate to hear from you how you feel about this presentation today. Thank you very much for your cooperation. And then let me ask you the third question. So typically project sponsors are pushing to start real work as soon as possible. What is your tactic to make them understand that tasks like stakeholder identification worth the time and effort?
Yeah, I know what you mean, and in particular, in some cultures, we are very eager to start the work, and it's not doesn't only apply to sponsor, but also applies to other stakeholders. It's not reserved for the top management to be eager to start the work, but other people are not very don't like to devote their time to planning as much. Uh, well, I would go with the cost impact because I think the one of the tips that we have in this presentation, because depending on the tolerance, I mean the approaches can be different because different organizations can have different tolerances towards different types of risks. So it's not the same whether you're working in a startup or in a big corporation. So, for example, startups are more sensitive probably to time, to risks relating to time and schedules, and the corporations are quite sensitive to risks related to costs. So I would go to communicating the risks and emphasizing the importance of the good risk management process, which cannot be performed without identifying all the stakeholders. And I would try calculating some cost impacts or estimating some cost impacts that I would communicate to the top managers, because usually they would respond to this.
Thank you. So many questions are coming in, so I would really appreciate just to answer these questions very briefly. So the next one is saying the following: what online tools do you recommend for stakeholder management? What online
Yeah.
tools do you recommend?
Well, there were a lot of discussions, and the webinar we did previously, Joshun and I, we had a very same question. To be honest, I don't really believe in tools because I mean I think tools can be very value added in certain situations. For example, for tracking progress, of course, schedule development and things like this. But I don't really think that tools can help you a great deal when managing the stakeholders. I think it's more about communication and soft skills. And as I said previously, I do believe in communication one-on-one, understanding each individual motivation, situation, and where he comes from, his concerns. So I wouldn't really rely too much on tools. On the other hand, there are a lot of useful tools, such as, for example, we use a lot of Trello in virtual teams. Trello is for me, it's a lot like agile approach, because it has these cards with doing, to do, planning, done, and so on. So it might be a useful tool to just keep track on different things that are in the pipeline within the virtual team. And yeah, there are other platforms for communication like Slack, for example, where you can have instant communication. So for instant communication and urgent messages, because you want somebody, if you send a message, you want people to be able to respond in the next 24 hours, even if they don't have time to act upon a certain task. You would like them to just to respond, yes, I saw the message, I would do that tomorrow, so on. So Slack is one of the platforms that can be used for things like that, and Trello for tracking the. But again, I wouldn't trade this for meetings, conversations, and yeah, so on.
Okay. Now the quick question comes from Balazs. So he's saying the following: how can we use the diversity checklist exactly? Are there any practical tips on that? So diversity checklist, how do we use that?
Well, I don't know. You probably mean the first checklist before we went to the culture. Well, the thing is that you need to go through these specific areas and specific bullet points, and just think about whether they might be relevant for your project. Some of those might not, and if they are, then you need to go deeper and analyze the differences, because the whole thing is to identify the gaps between the way we are working, or you are working as a project manager in your own environment, and the way that other people that are involved in your project or other stakeholders are used to work, and then identify those gaps. For example, if you are working with people in Japan, and you need to travel there, and you need to work there, you need to have in mind that the keyboards in Japan you don't have Latin letters on them. So if you didn't know that, you would be surprised coming to Japan not being able to type using the equipment that is available for you, without you need to remember where each letter on a keyboard is. For example, that's just one simple example, not really huge, but there are other things that you can think about in the same way.
Thank you very much.
So
And now here,
for example, types of documentation that people are using. Some cultures or some countries or some corporations have their own documentation systems, and then they expect you to have certain documents prepared that you might not be aware of, because so just things that you need to check, the expectations from the other side.
I see. Now, there's another question from Laszlo Ladic, and I have to read it twice. So he's saying the following: in many cases, I have the feeling that the senior management expects the project manager to turn the trick and make achievements in a non-aligned environment. In your opinion, what is the optimal share of accountability and responsibility between the sponsor and the project manager? So this is the first question. And the second part of the very same question is, how can a project manager rely on strategic alignment of the project goals and strategic alignment of the stakeholders? So let's focus on the first question. So in your opinion, what is the optimal share of accountability and responsibility between the project sponsor and the project manager?
This optimal share strongly depends on the type of the organization that you are working in. And this is one thing that you need to be aware right from the start, because, for example, in functional organizations, as you all know, project manager, if he exists as such, has practically no authority over his team. And of course, you cannot impose expectations in front of somebody and not give him the authority to fulfill these expectations. So I think that for the project manager, it is very, very important that he makes this clear with his sponsor right from the start. And this is why the project charter for me as a document is very important, as one document, one place where these things can be documented and signed off, approved right from the start. So in the project charter, you can define this divided responsibilities and divided roles in terms of responsibility and accountability. And it strongly depends on the type of the organizations that you're in, but it can also depend on a project, because on some bigger projects, strategic projects, even functional organizations can be prepared to have a composite organization, to give a project manager the authority over the budget as well, and the authority to run the project as he was in a projectized organization. But it can happen for particular projects, not all the projects in the organization.
Okay, so 5 minutes to go until the end, and we are
the other
seeing
question,
a couple of other questions.
was
How a project manager can rely on strategic alignment of the project goals and the strategic alignment of the stakeholders.
I think this is something that PMOs in the organization can help a lot. Because of course you can have the methodology and apply the methodology, not having the project management office in your organization, but some kind of structure or organizational unit that is dealing with portfolio management can help a lot with this. So usually an organization would need some kind of central repository of all the projects and some prioritization tools. And there are a lot of those tools. You might look at those tools and maybe propose to use them in your organization, because of course when we have a strategy and strategic objectives and we have a number of ideas and initiatives on how to achieve those objectives, but we have limited resources, of course. And then there are some very interesting tools that you can find to score the initiatives for different things like benefits, achievability, and so on, and then present the proposed priorities to your top management, and then decide on the senior team level whether the initiative is aligned and whether they have a green light to start with it.
Okay, and probably the last question for today, just before we wrap up the WebEx today. So what is your ultimate tip of these tips? What is your ultimate tip of these tips? That's the first part of the question. And the second part, what is the most important in stakeholder management in your opinion? So ultimate tip, and what is the most important thing in stakeholder management?
Yeah, well, the ultimate tip probably would be the one of regularly reviewing the requirements with all the stakeholders, assuming that you identified all your stakeholders. And even though you identify all the stakeholders and relevant strategies, it might not be possible that you would be able to actually achieve all, answer all the requirements, And then probably you would have to focus on the key stakeholders, which you need to manage closely. And one of the tools to do that is to review the requirements, very regularly with them. So that's how they would feel involved. They will see that you are interested in their opinion, and they will be more motivated to support you and even give you some feedback so that you can adapt your strategies. And And the second question
Okay.
was, what is the most important
Most
things
important in stakeholder management.
most important thing in stakeholder management, of course, I would say, is communication. But it shouldn't be like one fits all. I strongly believe in this individual. You need to, as a project manager, yes, you need to be some kind of a Superman, and not everybody is is just can be a good project managers. Although a lot of things can be learned and developed, a lot of skills. But I would say targeted communication and understanding people's needs, people's expectations, and responding to those with individual strategies.
Thank you very much. We are just on time. And the final closing comment, I would like to say thank you very much, Zorana, for this wonderful presentation. And I really appreciate that you were able to answer so many questions what we received from our participants. Ladies and gentlemen, the final comment from my end, I would like to say thank you very much to Zoltán Mészáros, because he was the one who shared with us another tool, which is a little bit better probably than the tools what we mentioned, and Nudge Csaba Nudge also mentioned that he would like to offer another tool which is slightly better than Trello, called ClickUp. So thanks very much for that. And the other tool is getharvest.com. So thank you guys. And I really appreciate that today so many of you joined the call, because altogether 249 people participated in this WebEx session. I think this is a new record. I'm going to share the recording with all of you. I'm going to talk to Zorana about the presentation, whether we can get it in PDF or not. And obviously all of you who attend the call, you can claim 1 PDF point after the meeting. You are going to get the PDF information from me later today. With that said, thank you very much. The next webinar is coming 1 month from now. That time I'm going to talk about the disciplined agile, which is actually the new approach from PMI. So disciplined agile is coming. Same time, same place, 1 month from now. With that said, thank you very much, Zorana. I wish you a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.